Okay, hello everyone. My name's Dr. Jane Sykes, and I'm a professor of small animal internal medicine at the University of California, Davis. I want to thank the World Small Animal Veterinary Association for giving me this opportunity to give you some tips on how to create, submit, and present a successful research abstract, be it in oral format or poster format. So, as an overview, I'm going to be talking about why you might want to present an abstract in the first place, topic and venue selection, some of the golden rules of submitting an abstract, the anatomy of a successful abstract, including background, methods, results, and conclusions, common reasons for rejection of abstracts, and then some presentation tips, both for oral abstracts and also for poster presentations. Some of the slides that I'm going to show you also contain some additional resources that you might find helpful. So abstracts are analogous to an elevator pitch for your research. The goals of abstract preparation and submission should be early dissemination of your research findings, engagement of colleagues and attendees. So this is really an important networking opportunity and an opportunity to get feedback on your research that will really help you ultimately publish it in a scientific journal. Also, they can be opportunities for awards, sometimes with cash. And getting abstracts on your CV can help you with employment opportunities. And also, you never know when you're going to meet your next boss at one of these meetings. So, submission of an abstract requires really careful planning and consideration. The more advanced planning that you have, the more successful that your research is going to be. The chance of abstract acceptance is going to increase if you submit impactful quality research that's relevant to the conference's audience. So it's critical that you understand who is going to be attending the conference and what their interests and expertise levels are. Don't submit findings that have already been published elsewhere unless your work adds something new, in which case you really should be focusing on that, or unless it presents a higher quality level of evidence. Don't submit a plan of work with no results. That's pretty much guaranteed to lead to rejection. And rejection is also really likely if you submit results without including any numerical data. And we're going to come back to that. If relevant, don't submit work that does not have ethics approval. And if you've got laboratory animal studies or terminal laboratory animal studies, always check with the conference instructions to make sure those types of abstracts are going to be permitted, because many conferences won't accept that type of research. Don't submit case reports unless they present something novel, for example, discovery of a new pathogen, discovery of a new treatment, or discovery of a new disease. And always make sure that case reports are permitted by the conference. While I think that case reports can sometimes really add to the literature, no conference wants to have their poster hall full of case reports. So, if you think about the goals of abstract presentation, including opportunities for networking and feedback, choosing the right venue is really important, and it's often not given as much thought as it really needs. So, consider even running your abstract subject matter through an AI platform for conference suggestions, because they can be very useful in suggesting upcoming conferences and how they might relate to your work. Think about when the conference is going to occur in relation to abstract submission. Make sure that you're available for the conference's entire poster session so that you can make the most of the opportunity that you have when you're there. How do you want to time the presentation of your abstract in relation to manuscript submission and hopefully publication? And how, where, and when does the conference allow abstract presentation itself? Are there going to be opportunities to present in oral format, in poster format, or both? And if there are posters, Is the format electronic or print? And if electronic, will electronic poster boards be available so you can stand by them and interact with attendees? Or are they going to be something that's delivered online only, which is going to limit your opportunity to do that? When and for how long are poster boards actually available if they're physical? And some large conferences will actually rotate poster sessions in a tight window, maybe 30 minutes to an hour. So you have a specified time slot to present, and you can only display your poster during that time. And so that might be limiting for you as well, but sometimes that's a really great way to interact with a lot of people quickly. Where will the posters be located relative to lecture halls and where people circulate? And does the conference have dedicated space in the program for an oral abstract session? And if so, when is that going to happen? And similarly for posters, is there time set aside for a poster session? You really don't want your abstract to be accepted, then not have the chance to actually properly interact with attendees because the posters are located far away from where people are actually present. And you also don't want poster sessions to be or abstract sessions to be right at the end of the conference when people are really tired out or they're leaving. So it's important to present at a conference that has the audience that's right for you and sufficient numbers of the people who you want to interact with and seek feedback from. It can be really disappointing to go to all the trouble to prepare a great abstract or poster, only to go to a conference that's relatively empty, or to present your work in a lecture hall with lots of empty seats. The location also matters because that's going to attract attendees, and it's an opportunity for you to combine work and play. However, that can also affect the cost of the conference if it's an expensive place to travel to and eat and stay, or if registration is very expensive. You also are going to need to consider things like poster printing costs. So together, all of those things can cost thousands of dollars. So it's really best to build them into the funding budget when you start your research at the very, very beginning. You can also look for things like speaker or travel grants. Some academic institutions, for example, some industry groups, and some foundations, such as the Morris Animal Foundation, sometimes offer them on a competitive basis, but that also requires advanced planning. So we've covered goals, topic selection, and identification of a venue. So now on to some of the golden rules for submission. It's really important to start as early as possible so there's time for input from your supervisor, colleagues, and also time for you to perform revisions. No matter what the abstract length maximum is, even if it's 300 or 500 words, keep it to less than 250 words because some journals consider any publication over 250 words as prior or previous publication, which would be a reason for automatic manuscript rejection. Remember that because these are abstracts, you don't have to present an entire research project or wait for all of the data to become available. And because abstracts are less than 250 words, each section has to be super short, usually only 1 to 3 sentences per section. So my basic rules of scientific writing, be it for abstracts or for full-length papers, are to be concise, to be precise, and to be nice, which means being collegial and positive in your writing style. But being concise and being precise is particularly important for abstracts because of their length limitation. Make the most of the allocated word count and don't use unnecessary words or long rambling sentences. Don't use emotional words like interestingly or fascinating or excellent, because what's interesting for you might not be for other people, and they're generally sort of filler words that are not really the facts, the detail that you want to convey. And then my other maxim is the 6 C's of abstract writing. So be concise, be clear, be correct or accurate, keep it cohesive so each section builds on another, maintain a collegial and professional tone, and ensure that the abstract is complete and no sections or data are missing. Finally, it's critical that you don't mislead the reader by overstating conclusions which are going to harm your scientific reputation. I'm going to be re-emphasizing that during the remainder of this presentation. Very importantly, read the instructions and follow them to a T. It's abstracts are typically rejected if they're over the character limit, or they don't match the required formatting. Some conferences will allow inclusion of graphics or tables, so check whether that's stated in the instructions. And if you do choose to include these, make sure they're of excellent quality. All images, if you're going to include, for example, a graphical abstract, should be at least 300 dpi, and tables should be capable of standing alone. Abstract acceptance can be a competitive process if there's only limited spots that are available in the program, or if there's limited poster space. So strive to make your abstract the easiest to read by reviewers. Because abstracts often include abbreviations to limit word count, define them at first mention, then be consistent with the use of the abbreviation thereafter. It's really important to keep methods in the methods. It's common to see some methods creep into the background section and keep results in the results. Use generic names of drugs or diagnostic tests whenever possible, but if brand is specifically relevant to the study, you can identify the company in parentheses as shown on this slide. And again, don't overstate conclusions. This is a graphic on the right-hand side from the story of the blind men and the elephant. You know, everybody's looking at different parts of the elephant without really considering the big picture and jumping to conclusions. Okay, so now let's move on to the specific abstract sections, starting with the title. So the title is really important. It needs to grab the reader's attention, and it should reflect the content of the abstract and make sure that it adheres to the character limits. Authorship. Authorship is so important to consider and spend time on before you send out a final abstract to potential authors. So authorship for abstracts should follow the same rules as for full-length manuscripts. People who are listed as authors on an abstract should have made substantial contribution. In other words, meaningful involvement in the design, conduct, or interpretation of the work. They should have been involved in scholarly drafting, in other words, writing the initial draft or providing critical intellectual revisions, and they should have reviewed and approved the final version to be published or presented. The lead author is usually going to be the person who performed the main experiments and who prepared the initial draft, perhaps you. And the order of subsequent co-authors is going to be based on relative overall contributions, although the senior author or mentor is usually listed last. Authorship disputes are best avoided by having a conversation about roles and order of names early in the research process, rather than waiting until the abstract is due or even worse, submitted. Use the phrase in general, authorship is about intellectual responsibility, not just participation. If multiple authors have clearly contributed equally, consider applying a superscript to those names and a footnote noting that there were equal contributions to the work. That has saved me on a number of occasions. And for more information on authorship order, I really strongly recommend that you take a look at the authorship guidelines from the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, which is shown on this page. And those were actually just updated in January of 2026. Don't put authors on just as a courtesy or a gift, or if they just provided routine technical services. Instead, acknowledge them with permission when the abstract is presented. Also, don't put people on the author list just to increase the chance of acceptance because they're known or highly respected. Make sure that all of the authors that you intend to include are aware of the submission and give permission for the submission. And when you reached out to them to get their information, including their degrees, affiliation, potentially their ORCID ID, any financial support or conflicts of interest, try to do that all at once. And that's also going to be beneficial for you to have when you subsequently submit your work for publication as a full-length manuscript. Make sure that you spell people's names correctly. That's going to be important in literature searches, and always try to include middle initials because that also can affect author searches. On the right here is a really nice article that was published in the journal Pediatrics. Actually, it's kind of a case report talking about how early discussion of authorship could have really helped to avoid conflicts that occurred. So it's kind of a good one to read. All right, so now let's talk about background and objectives. So the background is really explaining why the research was done, why it matters. Again, keep it short, sometimes as short as just 1 or 2 sentences, and relevant to the background knowledge of the audience. And typically, you're not going to include any references in the background section for an abstract. The objective covers what specific questions were asked and preferably a specific testable research hypothesis, such as the one shown here. We hypothesized that the prevalence of multi-drug resistant bacterial infections would be higher in dogs seen at a referral hospital than in dogs seen in primary care practice. So now on to the methods. It's important to consistently use past tense throughout. Define the study type first, then the study population, considering the variables that are on this slide. So the number of type of animals that were in the study, their health status, geographic location, timing, for example, the years of the study and which institutions were involved. Also information on what data were collected and how they were analyzed, including statistical methods and any software used. All right, so now let's move on to the results. The results should concisely and clearly summarize your findings, always using numerical data. If you don't have numerical data, there's a really good chance that your abstract's going to get rejected. And when performed properly, assuming your statistical analysis has been performed properly, including statistical analysis will really help with the chance of acceptance as well. And note that there's generally been a move away from using p-values with a focus on confidence intervals instead. The JAVMA paper that's on this slide discusses this in more depth, so I recommend you take a look at that particular paper. Don't report trends, as it could overstate conclusions and lead to abstract rejection, and consider adding tables or graphical abstract to convey details if allowed, as I said previously. Like, it's really, really important never to fabricate or manipulate results to make conclusions that you believe exist. That could lead to rejection. It could lead to reputational damage and even sanctions by journals or institutional disciplinary action. And now finally, conclusions and clinical significance. So the conclusions are the so what factor. Continue again to use past tense here. And again, it's really important not to overstate conclusions. If you're presenting at a global conference, are your findings broadly applicable? What are the major limitations of the study and possible future directions? So you're going to have to distill these down to the really important things that you want to convey to the reader. All right, so finally, just to sum up some common reasons for rejection. The most common reasons for rejection are a lack of clarity and vague methods and results, complete absence of results, or a suggestion that they're going to be discussed. Never say in your abstract, results will be discussed, or we will discuss results. Another common reason for rejection is that the topic does not fit the conference theme. So, for example, it's a companion animal conference and there's results of experiments that involve monkeys. Poor grammar and formatting, or using the wrong language, and that suggests sloppy research. So is another reason for rejection. If there are conflicts of interest or apparent industry bias, if there are ethics concerns, if it's a report of a common condition or a case report that lacks novelty, if there's been previous publication, and again, it's not novel work, and again, I'm going to say it again, overstated conclusions. So you want to avoid all of those things so you don't end up with the big rejection stamp. Okay, so let's say your abstract gets accepted. Congratulations. Now you've got to decide whether your information best lends itself to poster or oral abstract presentation. And that might be a question when you submit your abstract if the conference does both formats. And don't automatically think that oral is better than poster, because some research is better in the format of a poster and other research is better in the format of an oral abstract. So master the art of both. Posters are great graphical abstracts and they're excellent for these sort of one-on-one type of interactions, which you might miss out on if you're presenting in an oral format. Oral abstracts allow more time for verbal elaboration and discussion in a group sort of format. So they're not necessarily more prestigious than posters. And in fact, posters can be even better than oral abstracts for some research. Know your audience. So you should know whether or not you're talking to experts on the topic, generalists, or lay people. And always, for both posters and oral presentations, less text and more visuals. So have this visual philosophy. For both types, be punctual, right? You don't want to be late or miss your time. And for posters, it's so important that you're present. It can be really frustrating for an attendee who goes to a poster session thinking that they're going to be able to interact with you, and they go to your poster and you're not there. It doesn't make you look good. It causes you to lose opportunities for networking. And so always be present during your poster session, and always dress professionally, because again, you never know when you're going to be meeting with your next boss. So no t-shirts, no hoodies. Always look as professional as you can. Okay, so for PowerPoint presentations, we're talking about oral abstracts here now and effective slide design. The general rule should be to stick to one slide per 1 to 2 minutes. So in general, you're looking at about 15 slides or 12 to 15 slides for an oral abstract presentation. The first slide should capture your audience's attention and include the title, authors, institution, and funding support. Include logos, but just be aware that some people will not allow you to use logos without permission. So always check that you can use logos, that you've got permission to do that. The second slide should be a conflict of interest slide. And across all slides, as I said, minimize text and ensure consistent fonts, colors, alignment, and branding throughout. So spell check, make sure there's no typos, and use the correct terminology. All of this attention to detail reflects well upon your work. To orient the listener, repeat abstract headers and sections on each slide, just like I've done here. So you can see that I've used the art of the oral abstract, effective slide design, the art of the oral abstract, effective slide design continued. So I'm trying to keep the listener oriented to the material that I'm presenting. And slides should always stand alone. In other words, an attendee should be able to walk into the abstract presentation halfway through, hopefully they don't do that because it can be distracting, but if they do, they should be able to immediately know what you're talking about by looking at the slide. Use animations rather than using a pointer unless you're really experienced and confident presenter, to avoid the pointer shake. So use of animations can really get around that and make it look like a lot cleaner presentation. That's also going to be better for virtual audiences if there's a virtual component to the conference, because they might not be able to see a laser pointer if they're watching virtually. Um, Given the time pressure on oral abstracts, it's absolutely essential to practice timing. You need to be done by 12 minutes and allow sufficient time for questions. Finish always with an acknowledgement slide, and you can take questions while that one's up on the screen. And remember that co-authors need to not be acknowledged, but you also need to get permission from the people who you do acknowledge. And then always anticipate questions that you might get. It's a good idea to include a couple of extra slides at the end, not slides that you plan on showing unless you get questions. It looks really good when you say something like, oh, here's something that I prepared earlier. And if you get a question that you don't know, it's fine to say that I don't know, or to say that that's outside the current scope of this project, but it's a great direction for future research. Keep answers to questions very brief, and don't let one question derail the entire session. Okay, so that's abstracts. Now we're going to talk about posters. Posters are great ways to present work that can be graphically described. In some ways, posters are better, as I said, than abstracts because they enable those one-on-one interactions. Make sure your poster is legible from a distance, and at least 30% ideally of your poster should be white space in order to minimize visual fatigue. Some of you may be aware that's been this recent movement to create this better poster concept, where there's a statement about the main findings provided centrally on the poster, together usually with a QR code to take you to a place where there's more details. So you can see that on this slide here. Some people really like that format, others are less enamored by it, but it's a good idea to take a look at how that can be done well by looking at some examples online. And there are going to be some conferences that require that format, so you need to check with the conference on the required poster format. Use captions to explain the figure findings, not just describing the figure. So to actually say, here's what this figure shows in the caption, that's the best way to use those. And then on the poster, you should include acknowledgements and disclosures. Including funding bodies, but always for both oral abstracts and for posters, get approval on the acknowledgements and sources of funding from those individuals, because there might be reasons why people absolutely do not want to be acknowledged, right? They might have conflicts of interest. There might be regulatory issues where they have to get any research passed through regulations to be approved, or there might be legal issues with their names. And certainly I've encountered those types of situations, and you really want to avoid those before a poster or an oral abstract is presented, because that can get you into a lot of trouble. So this slide is kind of a do's and don'ts of poster presentations, including the word count do's and don'ts, the headings, font size that you should be aiming for, graphics, information on color and what colors to avoid, how layout should occur, and also providing additional resources so people can get information or follow up with you later. So when presenting posters, have 3 different approaches in your back pocket. The speed dial version, which is the 30-second, version for people who are just browsing through a poster session. The second version would be a 3-minute walkthrough version where somebody says, tell me about your work. They don't really want to spend a lot of time with you, but you've got a 3-minute version to really be concise and provide an elevator pitch. And then the third version would be something that's deeper, where someone is really interested in your work and they want a more in-depth explanation. So kind of have those three options with you in advance when you're presenting the poster. And body language is really important. I'm going to say it again, be present, dress professionally, wear your name badge so you can be identified easily, introduce yourself when people go by and stop, and ask visitors where they're from as well too. So, where are you from? What's your background? Make eye contact. Stand to one side of your poster so you don't obstruct the view of your poster. And of course, be really enthusiastic. Show your passion and enthusiasm for the work. As I said, include that QR code, which could include a link to a PDF of the poster, a final paper if you have one available, your LinkedIn, and so forth. Always take some tools with you, including extra push pins if it's physical posters or Velcro. Take business cards with you so that you can hand them to people who you speak with, potentially a holder if you want to pin those to the side of your poster. And if you're traveling, bring a hard tube so there's no damage to your poster during travel, or consider use of one of these fabric printed posters. There are many people that will print posters on fabric, and that allows you to fold the poster up and put it in your suitcase. You can also carry sometimes an electronic version on a drive that you can then print on site to avoid having to carry it with you. But don't leave your poster in the security line or on the plane. It's really common for posters to roll to the back of bins in an airplane, and then you get off in a rush and forget your poster, and that is really devastating when it occurs. So make sure that you're always thinking about those things during travel. Display your poster at the conference as soon as possible, and don't take it down early. Again, I'm just re-emphasizing the importance of using all the time that you have, given that you've gone through so much to get an abstract accepted, a poster printed. Don't just put it up briefly for, a day when you really could have it up there for 3 days and you could be present and networking with more people. And then maintain the momentum. And when you do take your poster down, go home and write the paper. So in summary, I really hope that I've convinced you that abstracts are great ways to disseminate your research findings early and provide important networking opportunities and getting feedback that will ultimately improve the success that your work is published in a peer-reviewed journal. But you need to start early and plan carefully. Select the topic and the conference thoughtfully. Consider your budget. Consider authorship early, ethics, funding considerations, and conflict of interest. And follow the instructions and make sure that you've got very strong attention to detail when you write your abstract. So think about these things that I reviewed with you: concise, precise, and nice, complete, clear, concise, cohesive, correct, and collegial. And again, I think I've said it several times, but I'm going to say it again: don't overstate conclusions and don't fabricate results. Master the art of both oral and poster presentation, and always get permission from authors and from funding bodies and acknowledge them appropriately. And most of all, have fun. I think it's really important to enjoy this opportunity. And on the left here in this picture here is Emma Cosaro, who was one of our residents, graduated from our internal medicine program. She presented on FIP using the initialism fantastic, intelligent, and passionate. And Courtney Moller on the right-hand side, who presented on brucella discospondilitis, and her her poster was Courtney never panics at the Brucella disco. So very fun. And in the center here is one of our wonderful medicine technicians, Ashley, highlighting how such events can also really help with service culture and promote teamwork. And this is Judith Escalona here on this slide, who is an undergraduate student who presented some work on valley fever with me at our undergraduate research symposium. So lots of good times and learning opportunities. So again, I would just want to finish by thanking the World Small Animal Veterinary Association for giving me the opportunity to present on this. And I really hope that overall it improves science and veterinary medicine research on companion animal diseases.